The women's ministry, we basically cater to 18 and up. And within that ministry, there's several ministries like the Widow Ministry and the Little Lambs Ministry, which is a care ministry for those with miscarriages and abortions. I miscarried a child in 1994, and then I found other women who had lost children. Some of them still were unhealed emotionally, and we just developed just a care program. It's a care box program, basically, that when one of the women requests a box, then we send that out. Unfortunately, we do run out of items. I hate that because I wish we never had to give a box away. But this is like a sample of what a box would include. They're going to get like a memorial box. So if they have like ultrasound pictures, they can put them in here. It's going to have the brochure. It's called Miscarriage, Loss, and Heaven's Babies. And it just gives the information, scripture, and how to deal with a grieving parent. Usually it's going to contain maybe some lotions, hand gels. It's going to contain a personal note. And then it will have a handcrafted blanket with a card in it. The card just basically says, we prayed for this memorial prayer blanket for you, and has a scripture on there. The woman who produces the most blankets, her name is Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen makes a crocheted blanket. They're so sweet. Look how sweet that is.
You have to stitch in the back of the stitch, and it makes the poof. And it's prettier than the flat. I can show you what a flat one is. I'll do 2 or 3 of them and let you see the difference. For the border, if I crochet backwards, it gives it a different look. See, these right here are just in the whole stitch, so they're flat. Can you see the difference? But I like this poof stitch.
A lady by the name of Pam, she has a sewing business. She makes us little blankets that look something like this. I've got several of them that she just trims, and sometimes she'll, if the baby had a name and we know it, she'll embroider the name on the blanket.
Okay, actually this doesn't need a bib. The first project I had was a jacket, a men's suit jacket of all things, which is the hardest thing on earth to make for my husband. And he said he felt like a Russian refugee in his suit, so that was a disaster. And last year I did 200 dresses from January to June, 200 alterations. I plan to tone it down, but I have problems saying no. So my friends that I know that have miscarried seem to do incredibly better than me. I passed the baby before I went to the doctor, and the doctor, he was so sweet. He was just precious. He cried with me. And I had a DNC in the hospital, and we wanted to get pregnant again, but we had to wait 2 months, and 2 months later I was pregnant again. And everybody told me that, you know, you can have a new baby, you can have another baby. It wasn't really a baby yet. And that I needed to get over being sad, but I had no closure. And I always wondered what happened. What they do? Did they throw my baby in a trash can, or what did they do to it? And I don't know. It's been so long, and it's like so raw.
Among the women in the ministry, there are really some diverse reasons why they have a compassion toward women who have miscarried or have been affiliated with an abortion. There is a woman who has both had a miscarriage and an abortion. There's more than one, actually. There are women whose husbands felt nothing when their child was miscarried and they had to go through it alone. One woman, she was sitting in the congregation when she discovered she was miscarrying, and it broke my heart to give her one of the boxes.
We had been married for 5 years, a little over 5 years, and we decided that it was time, or that we wanted to start a family. I came to church on a Sunday morning, and I just started feeling really gross and disgusting. So I went out, and I was just bleeding everywhere. So I came back in and got my husband. I was like, we've got to go. I'll never forget, it was on August 20th of 2017. Because the next day was a solar eclipse, and I couldn't get into a doctor anywhere because everything was just shut down. And so on that following Tuesday, I went into my doctor, and she looked at me like I was losing my mind. She's like, "You're just having a heavy period." I was like, "That's not true." I'm like, "I know better than that." And she wouldn't even check for a heartbeat. She was like, "All I'm going to do is do blood tests." She called me that afternoon. She's like, "You're right, your levels are high, you were pregnant." So I went back in that Friday, and she did tests again, and still, no, she didn't check for a heartbeat or anything. And she called me, she's like, "It'll take a few hours." So I went on into work, and she called me, I guess 3 or 4 hours later, and she's like, "Miss Stoll, your levels are going up." She's like, "You're still pregnant." And so I was just, I'm crying, I'm emotional, because I had, I thought my baby was gone forever. And I asked her, I was like, well, what was all that I went through? And she was like, well, it could be several different things. She said, you could have lost a baby. She said, you will never know here for sure. We know what we felt in our hearts, my husband and I both, and because we felt that loss so deeply. It was kind of a mixed emotions, we're so excited for our son that we have, and also you feel the loss of what could have been. And I probably feel it the most when I watch moms with twins. I have a friend that has twins that are 3 months older than my son, and they play together all the time, and I watch them, and then I think, and I wonder, what would have been here. Miscarriage was always just a word that I heard. Like it didn't really register the loss that people felt. And all of a sudden, it went from not just being a word, but reality, the loss that people feel, the pain that you go through, just feeling empty and not knowing.
Concerning what you should do or shouldn't do when someone has a miscarriage, I think it's going to largely depend on the woman, but there are some things you can be careful about, like saying things that disregard the child, like, oh, you can have another one, or you already have one, or at least you have one. One child doesn't discount the other. One of the things I did not like to hear was, how far along were you anyway? It made me feel like if I wasn't far enough along to their standard, that my child didn't matter.
What I have seen and witnessed with women who have had pregnancy loss is a lot of dismissal. And a lot of it is really, it's cloaked in a well-meaning way. The girl or the woman may be in incredible depression, and they find, and their church member, family member finds out, and they say, well, God won't give you more than you can handle, and just dismiss it with a one-liner. And to me, that has always felt just a little brutal to dismiss that. And which is really happening in that scenario is they sense the pain there, and they don't want to sense any pain. And so if we can dismiss it with a cliche or a one-liner, let's do that and move on. What I would say is it's not mistreatment, it's just an unfortunate or a ill-informed way of caring for that person. I believe our culture has an undercurrent, a subconscious that runs through all of us, and whether we want to pick up on some of these vibes or not, often we do. And so even meaning mothers who have had these losses maybe don't feel entitled to grieve about it because of the way our society views children and unborn children as being expendable.
I'm out one weekend and I'm driving around with my best friend, and I meet up with my old buddy, Roy Jordan. And we ended up, we went to school together in 6th grade all the way through high school. We ended up dating. He asked me to marry him after about a month after dating. And then 7 months later, we got married. I was in the barn messing around with the horses, and we had this 2x4 ladder that was built, and this friend of ours was in the barn with my mom and I, and he walked underneath it. When he walked underneath it, he hit it and it bumped. Well, it hit me in the head about right here, and it hit my mom in the temple. Well, I had a goose egg probably about this big off my head, and it caused a blood clot in my head around right here, the venous sinus vein. So here I am in 2000 on blood thinners and everything, and I'm pregnant. And we did the pregnancy test, we did everything. We even got to hear the baby's heartbeat, so that's how far along I was. They already told us, go ahead and plan your wife's funeral, because as soon as she has this baby, she's dead. She won't even make it off the table. So we go to the abortion clinic, and there's this room. There's 30 women, and Roy is the only man in there with me. And they're going around, do you want a Valium? Do you want a Valium? Do you want a Valium? And they come to me and they say, do you want a Valium? I said, why do I want to numb the pain when I'm fixing to kill this child? And this one lady looks over at me, she goes, honey, she goes, it's nothing. She said, I've already had 8 of these. She says, it's just easy peasy, get it over and done with. They call me back, and I go into this room, and it's a little bitty room. They have this table. On this one side, there's this cabinet, and there's this big thing. It just looks like it's big and round, and and then there's this big long rope. It's almost like it looks like a big, huge vacuum cleaner. I looked at him, I said, am I doing the right thing? I'm fixing to kill this child. Am I doing the right thing? And the doctor looks at me and he says, you're gonna die. You're gonna die. And then I look over at this thing and I'm like, this is fixing to rip this child apart. They turn on this machine and you can hear the suction. And you're sitting here on this bed and they start ripping this child apart, but you have such a pain. It's such a pain, it's worse than child labor. It's so painful. And Roy and I get in the truck after that, and I looked at him and I said, what did we just do? We can't take this back.
From personal experience, personal friends of mine, who people I'm close to, or have been close to, who I've known have experienced pregnancy loss, depression is really the word that comes to mind. I mean, I've just seen some others go through pretty hard times.
I didn't get out of bed for weeks. I laid in the bed for probably about 3 weeks until my best friend came over and jerked me up out of the bed, and she threw me in the shower and she said, get it together, you've got 2 other kids you gotta raise.
Even though I've miscarried, I really don't know what another woman's going through. So I don't say I understand, because truly, I don't know that I do. I don't feel like anyone understood what I was going through. That's one of the reasons I just like to say I celebrate the life that you had within you, and I mourn the fact that it's going to be a little while before you see them.
When I was a teenager, I found myself in a crisis pregnancy and was encouraged to have the baby later. And I ended up going through with that decision and regretted it immediately afterward. As the years passed and as I had other children, I realized that there was not going to ever be a baby that would replace that baby. I found a healing program. I wanted to do a marker in a cemetery for my baby to remember him as you would any other family member that you've lost. And we established the memorial in Frankfort Cemetery in Frankfort, Kentucky.
My first time there was just a few years ago, just to look at it, and it was just so special. People having their names of their children on the walls, and what it took for them just to do what they did by putting that and acknowledging them and putting their names on the wall. So a couple years ago, I had the names of my 2 children, whom I had aborted when I was younger, placed on the memorial wall.
It's so hard for sometimes family members and friends to understand that a life was lost. And so they feel alone in their grief. And this gives them an opportunity to be with others, to visually see that others have experienced the same thing. And it also provides closure, just as you would have for any other family member.
Children have every right to be memorialized as any other human being in the world. They are very deserving, maybe most deserving of being remembered.
The healing took place when I went to Door Hope and I mentored girls, but I had to go through also a little study that they do with women who have had abortions. I got to make a little mural, and I took a canvas, and I took my hands right here. You can take this and put paint on them and nail it down, and it looks like a baby's footprint. And you take your pinky and you can make the toes. And we did name him. We named him James Augustus.
That's one thing that I discovered, that most people only talk to the mother and only feel like the mother's the one that's going through the loss. But I watched my husband grieve, and I watched him process loss as well.
When we send our packages out, if we know the father's name, we address it to both of them. And sometimes one woman, she just reported to me that the night they got it, that she held onto the blanket while her husband held on to her.
To see him grieve as well was healing to me. There was days that were harder for me, and then there was times that were harder for him.
Everybody's different in the grieving process. It may take years. Just love them.
And if they don't know what to say, just be there. That's all I wanted, just someone to be there.
It doesn't take very long, really, to do the little lamb blankets. I pray for them. When I'm doing it, these stitches are made with love.